Today, we're gonna be comparing the cameras on these two guys right here. This is the iPhone 13 Pro. This is the iPhone 14 Pro Max. We're gonna be doing a bunch of tests, taking some portraits, taking some urban photos, doing a bunch of video as well to see the difference between these and if it's actually worth the upgrade. If you're coming from something like a 13 Pro and you want to take better videos, is this gonna do it for you? Is it gonna give you better photos? Is it gonna give you better videos? That's exactly what we're here to test. So without further ado, let's actually go take some photos. I'm gonna be taking some portraits of V behind the camera. We're gonna be taking some different photos out and about, really trying to push these to the test, and then make sure you watch till the end because I'm gonna take all the files into the computer, into the edit, and see how they actually hold up.
Work hard, rest often.
There's actually this real cool red wall over here. I think that should be cool for some good photos. Different, tonal range and stuff. Okay, so I'll get both phones out here. My pockets are big enough to do that. And then you're gonna stand like in this general area. Hi, this is V. She's gonna be in front of the camera.
Frame it, it's horrible.
She's gonna be in front of the camera today. So big shout out to her. Her info will be down in the description down below. And we're gonna take some photos We're gonna take some photos against this red wall and see how it looks. I feel like it should lend to a nice tonal range and the outfit actually works out, so you'll stand out quite well from the background. So this is gonna be a very high-tech test. I'm just gonna open the camera on both of these and hold it side by side, so that way we get the most accurate image between the two possible. And I'm gonna do the thing that I always tell everyone to do, and that's I'm gonna drop a little lower here. Yeah, there you go, and now look off. Right away, I don't know if it's the display, my screen protector or what. I feel like the 14 is a little more vibrant. Now the 14 Pro, 14 Pro Max actually have the 1, 2, and 3 times, whereas this guy just has the 1 and 3. So you have a nice middle ground there as well, which I can't get here. I either have the really close up or the standard lens. Trying to keep the perspectives kind of similar here. Yeah, I definitely feel like the 14 is a little warmer in tone as well. 3, 2, 1. Impressions here, I definitely think the 14 is a little more vibrant in how it either processes the photos or captures them. And it's a little warmer toned, but that can always be fixed in post as well. Something I do also want to try is there is a stabilized video function that they have now. That would be something I would like to have in something like the 13. So we're gonna try some running at some point during this. So I kind of think this could be a cool composition here, getting part of the bridge and then maybe getting a bit of the city in there. So I'm gonna take a couple shots with both phones to see how that actually will look. Maybe on like a 3x lens. Get some of the CN Tower in there, that could be cool. All in all, these are looking pretty similar, and it seems that they would be anyways, considering you're comparing like one generation away. Ooh, this is a good angle. If we get like kind of part of the building there with the bridge. So if I go, I think I'll need the 3x lens again here. I do like that longer angle. So if I come up and just catch part of that building with the bridge there, that should be a good kind of urban city style shot. Especially if we bring it down in post, make it a little moodier. I think that could really lend to a nice look. One big thing that is introduced with the 14 is that stabilization in the actual cameras themselves. And I want to see just how good it is. So we're gonna find a good spot, do some running, compare that with the 13 to see what it's like with the shake versus without. I think this spot that we found will actually work really well because we're gonna have some symmetry on both sides. And it should actually allow for a nice wide shot, allowing to really see how that stabilization works.
Show them the dog. He's a cute dog.
Actually, at the spot now, we're gonna do some running tests. I'm gonna switch the 14 over to video mode, and there's this little icon here up at the top. If I hit that, that is the action mode, they call it, which is gonna add some stabilization in there. Gonna do 2 different times. One, I'm gonna be running backwards, and then the other I'm gonna be running forwards after her. So that way we can get a accurate representation. I'm not gonna be doing like a ninja walk or anything like that that you see with gimbals to get that smooth motion. I'm gonna try to emphasize this and test it as much as possible. Go for it. don't know that I recommend running backwards that fast, but you know what? If it works, it works. I'm gonna have to review that and see how it even looked.
I ran faster than you.
There's a dog.
And 3, 2, 1, go for it. Okay, that's stable. Like when I was filming it, it didn't look that steady, but it's really good. Yeah, like as I was filming it, I was like, I don't know how this is gonna look. It's a little sketchy. I thought almost when I was actually filming it that the 13 looked better. I don't know if that's because it was in my dominant hand or what, but reviewing the footage even quickly on the phone, it is really stable. Like, really stable. So if you're trying to make better videos on your phone, maybe the 14 Pro Max is the way to go. We're gonna take some more portraits. We're gonna play around a little bit more, and then we'll go back and give you the final version. I walked by it earlier and it looked pretty cool. So there's this kind of reflective dome, really interesting looking structure thing as part of an apartment building or something here. So I want to take a couple portraits there, maybe throw on the portrait mode, get a bit of the city in the background blurred out, and just see how that looks between the two different portrait modes and the different lenses. This is the spot we're talking about. So we got some nice chrome action going on here. Should make for some great portraits, I think. What do you think?
About what?
Do you think it'll make some great portraits?
Because you take them, then yeah.
She's not biased at all. So I'm gonna flip both of these into portrait mode and see what that'll actually do for us. And then I think I'll also get a couple wide angle shots that I think from down below will look really cool, getting this kind of geometric arch thing that's going on here. Maybe stand a little this way, like back to the, closer to the thingy. Yeah, there you go. Nice. And bring your, yeah, there you go. And look forward. Nice. I think the portrait mode on the 14 is better. It isolates you a little better. That looks great. And look out to your right for me. That looks great. I think the 14 has a bit more dynamic range too, but I could be wrong. Look out and then turn to me slowly when you fix your hair. And I think the last thing we need to do to test these two cameras against each other is take a couple night photos. So we're gonna wait a couple hours, take a couple photos on a balcony just to see the difference, how they work at night, to really test them out, and then we'll give you the final thoughts. Yeah, exactly. Then if I come over here, ooh, that's really nice. Hold that. Portrait mode will work on the iPhone 14 Pro Max at night and still blur out the background. On the regular lens, on the portrait, like tighter telephoto lens, it won't work. But on the 13 Pro, it won't work at all in portrait mode. So you get kind of one or the other. You can either see at night or you get the nice blurry background. You don't get both, which is an interesting thing that I did not realize. I didn't super look into a lot of the specs between the two cameras. I just wanted to do like a first person, like this is how the cameras actually work. Let's actually take a look at the files up close and personal to see really what the differences are between them. All right, we are back at the computer to talk about these files from these two different phones. First up, we're gonna go through the different photos, compare what we noticed between the 13 and the 14, and then we're gonna talk about the video. So going through the photos, the first thing that I really notice is the 14 seems, with its high dynamic range, it brings down the highlights a little bit more. They seem to be a little more protected. The overall image of the 13 appears a little bit brighter, which might be where part of this lies. Where I noticed it is, for one, under this photo of the bridge, you can really tell in the highlights near the CN Tower there, but also even in the photo of these face, the 14, I think it has a little bit more warmth, but I also think there's a little more green undertones to it, which might be desirable or not, depending on how you like your images processed. Now, obviously, you can edit all of these to your liking, but these are straight out of the camera, my observations on what I'm noticing. As far as actual detail and sharpness, I'm not noticing too much disparity between the two cameras. Even when I zoom into the details, whether it be in V's eyes or texture in the bridge, both of them seem to have a
similar quality there. If anything, maybe there's a touch more sharpness or a touch more detail in the 14, but you're not gonna really notice it unless you crop in a large amount. You might be able to get away if you're zooming in, or maybe you'll notice it a bit at night, but those photos we're gonna get into momentarily. Even when you look at these two photos of the modern building framed by the bridge, they look nearly identical, and I think that's partially the point. If we zoom in closer, we can see detail-wise, we're pretty much on par between the two. In fact, this one, it almost looks like the 13 is a little bit sharper, but that could just be where the focal point was. But also, I think for sure the 14 has more green in its overall processing, which isn't a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just an observation more than anything. Then here in the portrait mode test, I took an image with portrait mode off on both of the cameras, and then took an image with portrait mode on and compared the portrait and the quality of the actual out of focus elements that we're getting. And I think for one, it's clear to see that it almost seems the out of focus elements in the 13 file are a little more blown out or a little blurrier, but I think it's worth noting that in the 14, in my opinion, they seem to look more natural, and you're getting more of a more natural bokeh or bokeh, those little out of focus circles, which are really the marker of out of focus area, so it's just less of a blur, whereas on the 13 it just kind of looks like everything's a little fuzzier, whereas on the 14 here in the background we can actually see some of those actual image circles, which is really nice to see. I'm glad they included this with portrait mode. I don't know if it's a mix of computational photography and the optics, but it's definitely something that's better to see. And then if we can notice across the board here too, with all of these, that the 14 definitely is a little warmer, a touch darker, and a touch on the more green side. There's definitely more magenta in the 13 files. Now, even though the 13s are JPEGs and the 14s are their native HEIS file, there doesn't seem to be too much disparity between the actual file types themselves and how they're handled. That's just how the two cameras were set up. I absolutely should have had them shooting the same file type, but that's just my own doing there. When we zoom in, it does seem that the 14 has a much better job actually retaining detail on that 3x lens. The highlights look more natural, the skin looks more natural. Like on the 13, it looks a little smudgy. It looks all just kind of like it's kind of gooed together. Like somebody took the clarity slider and went down a bit on it. But in the 14, you can actually have a lot more of that detail there. And when we talk about sharpness and detail, a lot of the times more expensive professional cameras are capturing that detail. And that's what we're seeing here, which is actually really refreshing to see from a phone camera. On the 13 portrait mode, you almost get a little more detail in the eye, but that could just be purely based on where the focus point is, if it missed a little bit there. But all in all, I think the actually fold on detail-wise, skin tone, all of it, I think the 14 handled it a little bit better here. For the wide shot, that 0.5 lens that we got from that low angle, both of these photos I have no problems with, but it does seem there's less fringing on the 14. Like if you look around some of the highlight areas around her hair and around her arm and those lines of the building, it does seem that there's a bit more haloing and a little bit of fringing going on, that little white outline. It does seem there's more of that on the 13. As we know, the ultimate photo test for any phone camera is low light, because that's when any camera is going to show its pure flaws. Something I noticed that you actually note as I was taking these photos is the 14 can have portrait mode in the standard 1x lens and night mode on at the same time. So you can take a long exposure photo and use portrait mode at the same time, whereas the 13 Pro, you cannot do this. They are, they're looking a little gooey. They're starting to show some flaws, but we're not getting too much noise. We're not getting a whole lot of artifacting here. So all in all, for night photos, I'm pretty pleased with both of these cameras. Like, to take photos like this, I would have to be at like a 1.8 or 1.2 with my ISO all the way up to like 10,000 or something insane, 5,000 minimum, and be at a really slow shutter speed. So the fact that these phones were able to do this is really quite impressive. I'm pretty happy with these. If you're taking some photos of your friends on a balcony, hey, these will do the trick at night. And lastly comes the real test, and that's video. Now for both of these, I did a cinematic mode test and I did a regular video test, so we can really compare all the different facets these two cameras have. Now, comparing the two videos in cinematic mode and outside of it, it does seem that the iPhone 13 Pro actually has the image a slight bit darker, but still the 14 is a little better at dealing with highlights. And color-wise, they're actually not too dissimilar. Both of these cameras handled the video really well, and either of them would be usable for any content creation needs that you have. In fact, more commercials even are being shot on iPhones and different phones like that. So I think this can be a great creative tool now. Even the slow-mo between these two are surprisingly great quality for both. In 1080, it's insane, the level of detail, and these frame rates, they go up to 240 frames per second, 240p. Meanwhile, the camera I'm shooting on right now, the EOS R, it only goes up to 60p. So if I needed to shoot something really slow-mo and I had my EOS R and I had this, I might end up shooting in this because of that 240 frames per second, but both of them look absolutely great. Now, the one thing I was really curious about is the action mode. And that was my main point of curiosity here. And when, I think I mentioned this after the video too, when I was filming it, I mentioned that I thought the 13 was going to be more stable just based on, I don't know if it was in my dominant hand or what. Upon reviewing the footage, the 14 Pro, that action mode is surprisingly good. Now, don't get me wrong, looking at it on a larger screen, it's not quite as impressive as when I first watched it back on the phone, but it is still surprisingly impressive. You're not getting a whole lot of those jitters, and I wasn't doing a ninja walk or anything to try and keep it stable. I was just running as I naturally would. Now, you'll still get a bit of those jitters, and it did seem sometimes the autofocus would jump from her to the background to back to her, so it would shake a little bit even based on that. But still, compared to the regular video, yeah, you're not getting as much of those micro jitters, but also the big movements aren't as exaggerated. Like if the camera's doing this, the frame is just going naturally up and coming back down. It's not doing this all the time. It's actually smoothing out that motion without cropping in a whole lot, which is really, really interesting to see and really raising the bar. If you're filming action stuff on your phone, or if you're filming your kids skateboarding or whatever you're doing, that action mode, if you're filming somebody running or running through the woods or anything, it's actually really impressive. Like, it almost looks like you're on a gimbal. Almost. Not quite that smooth, but even gimbals you still have to do that ninja walk with. So, you know what? This was impressive, and I'm sure if I actually did do the ninja walk, my lord, it would probably blow me away. The barrier to entry for creators, for professionals, is getting smaller, and it's within our pockets now. If you have the 13 Pro, the 13 Pro Max, and you're looking at the 14 Pro, hopefully this gave you some insight on whether or not to upgrade. And if you don't have the 13 Pro and you have a later model iPhone, hopefully this showed you the difference between the two, and are the differences worth it? That's something you have to ask yourself. For me, it's the photos, I like them a little bit more out of the 14 Pro. It's not enough to switch for me to justify going just the 14 Pro over the 13. However, the added video elements, even the action mode itself, might just be enough. If I were weighing the two, if I didn't have either and I were weighing the two, if I were coming from an Android and I were weighing the two, I think I would go with the 14 Pro, 14 Pro Max. I think that would be the way I would go. And it's just that powerful of a tool for me as a creator that I think it would be worth it for creating steady behind the scenes videos, for all that sort of stuff. I think it might just be worth it. But if I were coming from the 13 Pro, 13 Pro Max, don't quite know that I would upgrade. I would have to think about it a little more. But ultimately, if you're considering that, the choice is yours. The information has been presented. I hope that I have given you enough to make an informed decision. And with all that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments what you would go with, or what you did go with, or what you are going with based off of this video. Like this video if you got some value out of it and enjoyed it. Subscribe if you have not already. And as always, work hard, rest often, and I'll see you on the next one.